In a packed courtroom, the air was thick with tension, whispers echoing off the marble walls as everyone watched the scene unfold. A respected black member of parliament stood tall, her eyes steady, her presence commanding. But then, in a shocking moment that froze time, the white police officer beside her lost control and slapped her across the face, right there, in front of the judge, the cameras, and the nation. The courtroom gasped. What happened next would shake the entire justice system to its core, and prove that silence was never her weapon. Power was. Before we continue, make sure to hit that subscribe button and like the video. This story is about to get intense. Just a week earlier, Parliament Square had been filled with voices demanding accountability, chants for justice echoing across the Capitol. Among those voices was Amara Lewis, a young but fearless black MP known for challenging corruption and systemic racism within law enforcement. She wasn't just a politician, she was a survivor, someone who had seen injustice firsthand and refused to stay silent. Amara's latest case involved a senior police officer accused of racially profiling dozens of black citizens, planting false evidence, and walking free every single time. But this time, things were different. Amara had gathered solid proof, security footage, testimonies, and reports that could expose decades of cover-ups. The trial had drawn national attention, with cameras flashing and journalists fighting for front-row seats. The man on trial, Detective Mark Halden, was once celebrated as a hero cop. But behind the medals and public praise hid a long record of misconduct swept neatly under the rug. He was confident, arrogant, and certain that no one, not even an MP, could bring him down. As the hearing began, Amara's calm voice carried the weight of generations. She spoke not just for herself, but for every person who had ever been silenced by injustice. Her every word struck deep, challenging the old guard who sat in quiet discomfort. Yet beneath that confidence, she knew this wasn't just a legal battle, it was a war against the system itself. What no one expected was how far that system, and one man in particular, would go to silence her. As the trial stretched into its third day, tension wrapped around the courtroom like an invisible noose. Every testimony Amara presented hit the defense like a thunderclap. The jurors leaned forward, hanging on to every detail. The forged arrest reports, the body cam footage conveniently missing, and the young men who'd been wrongfully jailed. Detective Halden, sitting across from her, clenched his jaw tighter with every passing minute. For years, he'd walked through these halls untouchable, shielded by his badge and the silent loyalty of his peers. But now, under the glare of truth, he felt cornered. Amara's evidence was undeniable. The courtroom buzzed with murmurs as she revealed documents proving that Halden had coordinated illegal raids in predominantly black neighborhoods, framing innocent people to boost his arrest record. His smirk began to fade. For the first time, the so-called hero cop looked human, afraid, exposed. Outside, the nation watched. News outlets streamed every moment live. Social media exploded with support for Amara, hashtags trending, messages pouring in from around the world. But there were also threats, hateful comments, anonymous calls, and veiled warnings that told her to back off before it's too late. She ignored them all. Her focus was unshakable. That morning, as she walked into court, her assistant had whispered, "Please be careful today. He looks desperate." Amara had smiled softly, replying, "Desperate men make mistakes. Let's make sure he does." And he did, when she confronted him with a recording, one that captured him admitting to tampering with evidence. Halden's composure cracked. His voice rose, his fists clenched, and his eyes burned with rage. You think you can ruin me?" he shouted, his face turning red. The judge ordered silence, but the damage was done. Everyone could see it, the mask slipping, the arrogance breaking. But then, as the court adjourned for a brief recess, Halden walked toward Amara, his expression twisted, his pride bleeding. In a moment of sheer fury, he did the unthinkable. Gasps filled the courtroom as Detective Halden's hand struck across Amara's face, the sharp crack echoing through the hall like a gunshot. Time froze. The judge's gavel dropped, reporters stood, and officers rushed forward, but for a split second, all eyes were on Amara. She didn't stumble. She didn't cry. Slowly, she lifted her head, her cheek marked, but her resolve unbroken. The silence was deafening, the kind that comes before a storm. Halden stood there panting, realizing what he'd just done in front of cameras, witnesses, and the very justice system he once served. Then Amara moved. Calmly, she straightened her jacket, locked eyes with him, and in a voice steady as steel said, "That strike wasn't against me. It was against every person this badge was supposed to protect." The courtroom erupted. Officers swarmed to restrain Halden, but he jerked free, still shouting that she had ruined his life. But his downfall had already begun. Within seconds, security footage from the courtroom was live on national television. Millions watched the so-called hero cop slap a black MP in front of the nation. Hashtags calling for his arrest trended instantly. Outside the courthouse, crowds gathered, not in anger alone, but in solidarity. The judge ordered Halden detained immediately for assaulting a public official, his career collapsing in real time. Amara stood still, breathing deeply, her voice calm but thunderous as she addressed the court. "Justice doesn't start when we're safe. It starts when we refuse to be silent." Her words echoed through the courtroom, the same room that had once protected men like him. And as Halden was led away in cuffs, his head lowered, his arrogance gone, Amara became a symbol, not of victimhood, but of unshakable power. By evening, every major news outlet carried the headline, "Police Hero Falls, Black MP Stands Tall." The viral video had crossed borders, sparking outrage, reflection, and debate across nations. What began as a courtroom case had become a turning point, a moment that forced people to confront the ugly truths buried beneath polished uniforms and hollow oaths. Amara refused interviews at first. She didn't want fame. She wanted change. Instead of sitting for talk shows, she stood before Parliament days later, her face still bruised, but her spirit unbroken. "This scar," she said, pointing gently to her cheek, "isn't a mark of pain. It's proof that no hand, no system, and no prejudice can silence truth." Her words silenced the chamber, and then the applause erupted like a wave. In the weeks that followed, a government inquiry opened into decades of racial bias in law enforcement. Officers came forward with confessions, whistleblowers spoke without fear, and old cases were reopened. The walls that had protected corruption began to crumble, piece by piece. As for Amara, she returned quietly to her community, working with young activists to build something lasting, mentorship programs, scholarships, and campaigns for fair policing. To her, justice wasn't revenge. It was restoration. Months later, standing before a crowd of students, she said, "They thought power was in the slap, but real power is in standing tall after it." The crowd roared, not out of pity, but out of pride. And somewhere in the depths of a prison cell, Mark Halden watched that speech on a flickering TV. The same woman he once tried to humiliate, now inspiring a generation he could never control. Because sometimes the most powerful punch isn't thrown in anger, It's delivered through truth, courage, and the refusal to bow down. What would you have done in Amara's place? Let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more real-life stories that expose truth and inspire strength.